This is a Compaq Deskpro 4000 from 1997, and in this video it will be fully restored. The rule is simple: only original hardware, no modern replacements, and it must be able to run Unreal Tournament 99. It will definitely be a worthwhile trip because this machine offers a deep look into old school tech, and it's just fascinating to dive into a world which once was and still kinda lives on. First step, get a computer. For a mid to late 90s project, a Pentium II, Pentium III or AMD K7 system will work just fine. Prices can be ridiculously high, but a bargain is always possible. I found this Compaq for less than $200, with most things being intact. This Deskpro 4000 tower is a classic example of build quality of the pre-2000s. The sturdy metal case is really heavy, offers a floppy drive and 3 5¼ drive base, complemented by a couple of air vents and the obligatory Intel sticker. The back of the case reveals plenty of connectors and expansion slots. Among them are connections for network, mouse, keyboard, serial, parallel, USB, audio, a game port, and VGA for your display. The interior of the Deskpro is kinda over-engineered. To add expansion cards, you first have to remove the expansion tray. It reveals a couple of ISA and PCI ports and an OEM Matrox graphics card. Additionally, there's also an AGP connector on the mainboard itself, making me kinda curious, but more on that later. The mainboard is on another tray and slides right out of the case for further inspection. What instantly stands out is the huge processor heatsink. With the Pentium II, Intel decided to opt in for a hassle-free processor package, the so-called single-edged contact cartridge. Also, the need for external level 2 cache chips required a little bit more real estate than the original Pentium. Usually, the Pentium II was connected perpendicular to the mainboard with the heatsink on its side. But Compaq went a different route. The processor connector is rotated by 90 degrees, which you can see when removing the processor unit from the board. I've never seen a slot 1 implementation like this, but given Compaq's cooling approach, it makes sense by keeping things low and allowing for a large heatsink. This is also a good time to replace this rather slow 233 MHz Pentium II with a 300 MHz version, the fastest option for this particular Deskpro model. The OEM heatsink of the faster Pentium required some brute force in the removal process, and I think Intel never really intended the heatsink to be removed. The screws were made of such soft alloy that one of it stripped immediately. Now, with the heatsink finally gone, the dry heat compound can be removed using a plastic scraper. Afterwards, isopropanol should dissolve the remaining heat compound and the surface looks neat and clean. I'll be doing the same procedure with the original CPU. Removing the blue heatsink reveals a clay-like heat compound, completely dry, which involved a tedious process with scraping and excessive cleaning. But the result is very satisfying. Both surfaces are clean and ready for reassembly. Dubious amounts of industrial heat compound will do the trick. This CPU has a TDP of only about 30 watts. Attaching the heatsink is done with 2 metal clamps. Before starting the system with the new processor, we have to set the right speed by using these small dip switches on the main board. Because Compaq was a friendly company, they've printed the settings on a sticker inside the case. Putting the case together again is easy. Slide the mainboard in place, slide the expansion tray in place, connecting the cables again. Last thing to do is adding a hard drive. Slide the drive in and tighten 2 screws. Done. Breaking my fingers while connecting the flat ribbon cable. Done. The CMOS battery on this model has been dead for a long time, and usually you can replace it, but this one seems to be soldered, so that's for another day, I suppose. Leaky capacitors can be an issue, but in my experience, the late 90s tech usually holds up well. Absolutely optional, but you will be surprised what a difference a decent CRT will do to your games. For this build I decided to use my 20-inch Apple Studio display. It's the only CRT I own which has a VGA connector. Minor upgrades. RAM, processors and vintage graphics card can be insanely low priced. So it's a no-brainer to upgrade this machine to the maximum specs it allows. A used Pentium II with 300 MHz just costs a couple of bucks and runs Unreal Tournament just fine. Some mainboards will be picky about which processor and RAM you use, so it's a good idea to consult the user manual before buying scrap metal. In my case, I had to learn that the mainboard itself does not offer the option to enter the BIOS for configuring basic stuff. It needs to be loaded from a separate partition on the hard drive or a floppy disk. Power supplies. In my experience, these can be most prone to fail, but the good news is, if you're not living in the Compaq world, chances are high that your case uses an ATX power supply. Buy a new one if you can, don't cheap out, and you will have a quiet and safe experience. Apart from that, you can install a SoundBlaster Live or an Oriole 3D sound card for a more immersive audio experience. Some of the old games had impressive audio rendering using a simple stereo setup. SoundBlaster Live gives you EAX, environmental audio extensions, resulting in slightly three-dimensional audio from a stereo speaker setup, but the main effect will be reverb and occlusion. Getting the right storage solution is a little bit trickier. If you want to go for the OG experience, get an IDE Hard Disk in working condition. There are refurbished disk drives on eBay, which means they are repaired and verified to be working, in a price range between 30 and 50 bucks. But keep in mind that mechanical drives may fail at any time. If you have never installed a DOS-based Microsoft operating system, this can be daunting. I'll take the traditional way here, which means booting from CD-ROM. Windows 98 comes with a generic driver for ATAPI CD-ROM drives, which supports a wide range of manufacturers. Now, the Windows 98 setup is usually straightforward if you're using OG hardware. Do what a setup routine asks for, reboot a couple of times. If it asks for more stuff, point the installer to the Windows 98 directory on the installation CD-ROM, and all should be good. Chances are high that many of the required drivers already come with the installation. In my case, the OS recognized most of the hardware. Transferring files. We want to copy a couple of drivers and games to the machine, and this could be done with a USB flash drive. USB is a special nutcase in Windows 98. We are in an era where USB was still a novelty, so plugging in a flash drive will likely do nothing. It just won't mount. You can install N USB to make Windows 98 recognize flash drives, and it also breaks my German OS and makes it a mix of 2 languages at the same time. This is awesome, but I've been warned by the installer. 90s USB is slow, but sufficient to get some files onto your drive. I mean, look at the time to copy Unreal via USB 1.1. So a better solution is transferring files over FTP. I'm using War FTP version 1.5 running on the Windows machine, so I can send files with FileZilla on any Mac, Linux or Windows client. The speed is decent and configuration is relatively easy. There are several versions of War FTP. I found the older one to be easier to use, and you can download it on archive.org. As with any legacy Windows system, do not connect it to the internet. A connection to your local network behind a modern router is usually okay, without specifying a DNS server or router in your Windows network configuration. As the system could still be compromised by any other client on the network, it's up to you to assess the risks of using FTP in your environment. I hate SoundBlaster Live. This is the part where I remembered why I'm not a Windows 98 guy. Because it can take you hours to get a simple thing running. I know, it's not always Microsoft's fault, especially when manufacturers do shitty things, like Creative with their SoundBlaster Live card driver. You think installing the card with the official driver from Creative does the trick? It sure does not. I'll spare you the details, but this has been excruciating. I didn't record the hassle I've gone through, but eventually Phil's computer lab had a driver which was finally working with VXD, EAX and Unreal Tournament. I'm very thankful for that, Phil. If you ever want to enjoy Unreal Tournament with EAX, be prepared to patch UT to version 4.36, apply the creative EAX patches on the UT installation, and you will be rewarded with a sound rendering of Unreal Tournament you've never heard before. Check this out. This is the original Unreal Tournament sound engine. And this is the same scene with EAX. The fun part, Voodoo graphics. 3D standards were still developing in the 90s. Silicon Graphics had OpenGL for the professional market. Microsoft tried to establish Direct3D, Matrox and a couple of other manufacturers were cooking their own soup, and so on. But 3dfx, with their Voodoo graphics card, already provided a 3D API called Glide, delivering high frame rates and insanely good-looking image quality. For the time back then, 3dfx was the choice for gaming, at least in my experience. But the Deskpro's weird design decision for the HP port kinda foiled my plan to switch to an easily available HEP-based Voodoo 3. No. So the obvious solution would be a PCI-based Voodoo 3. Less performance, still better than a Voodoo 2, but boy, what the fuck? It's so rare that prices are going through the roof. So one evening I was browsing for Voodoo 3 cards and I noticed something odd. The Voodoo 3 2000 with HEP has an unpopulated part on its PCB, usually where the S-Video connector goes. This part of the PCB can be removed, making the card kind of low profile compatible. To make sure, I printed a photo of the card on a piece of paper and put this dummy into the case. Problem solved. The following scenes may not be for the faint of heart. After filing the edges, the card looks just fine. Will it fit into the Deskpro? Yes, it does. Upon boot, the Voodoo free shows its BIOS splash screen. The driver installation is easy, and one reboot later, the desktop shows up in splendid colors and refresh rate. While stress testing the card, everything went fine, but I noticed it ran pretty hot. With a position cramped up like this, I decided the card deserves some better temperature management. With a little bit of crafting, this tiny radial fan makes the perfect companion for the heatsink. I managed to funnel the air through the heatsink and the radial fan pulls it out. It's not elegant, but it works, and the fan runs surprisingly quiet. Conclusion. So, here we have it, my personal UT99 dream machine. Was it worth the hassle? Let's see. Windows 98? I love the quirkiness and experience. There's still so much to discover. The 3DFX Voodoo? Yes, indeed. What a trip to the past, and the rendering looks one of a kind. The SoundBlaster Live? I won't comment on that. This machine's got everything a 90s soul would wish for. Performance in UT comes with a couple of frame drops, the EAX sound is kinda cool, and it renders and feels like the original game. I'm looking forward to other games like Thief, The Sims and System Shock. Many nights of happy gaming lie in front of me. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.